So Thursday, March 9th, 2023 is actually a fantastic day to be a Nintendo Switch gamer, especially if you are subscribed to Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack, because there are a couple different updates that just went live for the service today. And in today's video, I want to boot up and play through a small portion of each of those updates together and have a broad conversation on where we should be setting our expectations when it comes to new content updates for Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack going forward. What's up, Nation? If it's your first time on the channel, make sure you join Sunbro Nation by subscribing below. Hit the like button on this video if you enjoy it today, and make sure you turn on your bell notification icon so you're kept up to date with all the newest gaming news. And as I mentioned, guys, today we were checking out the couple different updates. First of which that hit NSO is a brand new Game Boy Advance game known as Metroid Fusion. And by the way, if you are enjoying or have played through any of Metroid Prime and you kind of are curious of what the series looks like from there, especially in its 2D roots, there's arguably not a better adventure to play through than Fusion. I played this shortly after Prime when it was released on the GameCube and it's one of my still to this day favorite Metroid games of all time, period. And I can say that about many of them, but honestly, it's incredible. Space horror vibes all throughout. We'll skip to just where it's actual gameplay so you guys can see that hands-on. So one thing I kind of forgot about Game Boy Advance games actually has to do with the amount of story that's in them, as just like the opening cutscene here looks and plays, feels fantastic, sets a nice tone for the game, and you kind of forget that it was really ahead of its time. Or I guess if you were a fan of Super Nintendo games growing up, and then, you know, the transition to 3D games happened, and that's where all of the big focus ended up being shifted towards, and then you kind of forget that 2D games can still be developed in a big way with a great story and even more impressive cutscenes to kind of tell that story and emphasize what's going on. And that's exactly what this game does right out of the gate. Now, in a perfect world, I would have liked to see Nintendo add this in to be playable before we actually got the Metroid Dread on the system, because there's actually a lot of story elements that play in from this title to Metroid Dread. And in a perfect world, you should go through 1 through 5 in order if you really want the full exposure of everything in terms of the story arc. But regardless, it's still a great play, and it's fantastic now that we have the ability to play every mainline Metroid 1 through 5 game on the Nintendo Switch. Samus Returns definitely has a better version out there on the 3DS. However, I do think that it is still very much worth playing through on the Game Boy if you haven't played it, or if you can't play it on the 3DS rather, but if you can play that version on the 3DS, that's the way to go. In terms of the update roadmap schedule and how I think Nintendo will do kind of like the next steps for Game Boy, is I kind of feel like it's going to be a rotation. I hope that we do get an N64 game in the month of March as well, but in the event that we don't, we are probably starting to look at more of a Game Boy Advance game, one per month, and then the month that we don't get that, we get an N64 game. I think Nintendo may stick to some kind of loose rotation schedule like that, and then the Game Boy family of systems is probably going to be its entire own thing, treated kind of separately. So we're in a good spot when it comes to NSO content overall, and clearly I'm missing something. I probably just need to talk to the computer again. So I think we're in a pretty good spot overall whenever it comes to new updates, especially whenever we're going to talk about the second update that's live in just a moment. But between the content roadmaps of NSO games being Game Boy, occasionally NES, SNES, and then we have things like Game Boy Advance and also N64 to look forward to in terms of new updates all at once. That is a lot of content and a lot of rotating libraries. And then we also have still some DLC packs, which will lead us to the next update we're going to hop into right now. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, the game that will never die, a 2014 Wii U game originally that is literally doubling its amount of content in this latest round of updates. And then the big talking point here is, of course, you can purchase this separately. You don't have to be a Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack subscriber, but how I get my updates for this game and stay up to date with the waves is through the expansion pack. And I will tell you guys right away, this is a very cool confirmation that we have in terms of the new characters being added that you may remember just yesterday on the channel we discussed briefly in terms of which characters they might be. I tended to not believe that 4chan post so much because it seemed like a lot of data and files that could have just been pulled from Tor, but what we do have is confirmation that at least 5 more characters will be added in, because we have question marks here. I don't think Nintendo would put question marks there unless they were planning on building out their character roadmap with 5 more additional characters. That means 2 or 3 in the next wave, and then 2 after that, or 3. You know, one of them will probably have 3, one of them will probably have 2. Maybe we just get to wave 6 and all 5 get dropped in at the same time. I think Diddy Kong's very likely at this point. Funky Kong, maybe Rob the Robot. I mean, I do think that they will be doing things like bringing back past characters. Primarily, maybe they just throw some curveballs and actually do add in new characters, but I'm definitely setting my expectations for past characters. And we're going to briefly play through this cup here that has Waluigi Stadium, because that's honestly the only track that I care about getting to more than anything else. I haven't played through any of this yet myself. I will go through all the tracks as I always do and always enjoy them when they drop on the service. But a lot of the tour tracks, it's nice to have for the first time, but I have such nostalgia for Double Dash, and so any tracks that come from that game, specifically tracks like Waluigi Stadium, that I have so many hours of fun playing on, and getting to check out a new character in the form of Birdo is always fantastic. So a lot of fun to have a reason to hop into Mario Kart with content updates. I do think that it's going to be something that will be really interesting to see as this game approaches that 50 million sold on the Switch, how Nintendo treats it whenever we talk about going forward into next gen, because do we actually get something like a re-release of Mario Kart with all of the DLC included on the next gen version and just have it resold again? I can definitely see Nintendo potentially doing something like that, because they're, well, when it's a safe bet and there's money to be made, Nintendo likes to go that route more often than not. But I do think you can make the case too that because of how long Mario Kart 8 Deluxe has now been around, they just really need to do something brand new from the ground up. And I do hope that we see something like that sooner rather than later into the next console generation's life cycle. I'm not expecting anything different in terms of a new Mario Kart game on the current gen at this point, of course, with the Booster Course Pass still going through the end of this year. But I do think that whenever we're talking about next gen later on, that it's certainly at that point in time to be talking about Mario Kart and something brand new. And then, you know, there's a lot of the discussion online talking about, will they do something like a double dash mode, or will they even make it like Nintendo Kart, where every, you know, major characters from all different franchises are supported? I am very much a fan of that idea. I definitely hope it happens. I don't know that it will. My first major wish list would be the double dash mode. I definitely think that they don't have to necessarily go central and build the whole gameplay mechanic around it like they did in Double Dash, and that's the only way you can play. But I definitely think that having a mode available for something like, oh, come on, we went up to first legitimately as the last frame that will allow you to do that. Also, shout outs to all the color options for Birdo too. I think that's fantastic. But it is one of those things where I feel like, you know, if they had a central mechanic like Double Dash just as a mode that's optional, it wouldn't be that hard to implement. And then even if you only do it in, like, you have Grand Prix Double Dash and then you have Grand Prix Single, I think that something like that could really work out. And if they do indeed expand the character roster to support a broader library of characters, that's just a win for people at the end of the day. But I will tell you guys this. As much as some people may be just done with Mario Kart 8 Deluxe at this point because of how long it's been on the market and sold, this game is still a ton of fun. I mean, legitimately, every time I hop into one of the waves and just check out the new courses, I'm immediately having fun again. There are some, you know, some arguments to be made that I've literally missed every item box so far. There's some arguments to be made that, you know, yeah, I'm ready for some different gameplay mechanics and have things tweaked at a big level, which, by the way, there is some patch notes that are not quite as obvious, I guess you could say, if you want to deep dive into them. But a lot of the different carts and the wheels, different customization options for your vehicles have all been tweaked slightly in terms of the stats that they offer. So if you're into competitive Mario Kart play, you might want to actually go in and, you know, take a look at exactly which vehicles and which characters were altered, because there are some differences, and then there's also some ones that were not changed. So it looks like Nintendo's really treating this more or less as a live service game, if you will. I mean, it's not exactly that, but it literally has a content roadmap, and I think we're going to kind of start to see them shift to that more and tie it to the expansion pack in the future. You're kind of already seeing it today when you talk about games like, you know, Xenoblade Chronicles 3, really anything that's new that comes out. You kind of see like, oh, here's the game, and you immediately know about it, and then more content's on the way. Here's the expansion pack roadmap. You know, we get that a lot in terms of whenever Nintendo just originally unveils a title, and then the next thing, we already know that there's more content to come. Now, when the game is content complete, I'm not opposed to that. When I am opposed to that is the drip feed content updates that we see with games like Mario Kart Sport, or not Mario Kart, Mario Sports games lately. So Strikers being the most recent example. I'm really not a fan of having a game launch with very minimal characters, very minimal stages, and then just missing some glaring online features like being able to play 4 separate players and play 8 altogether. There's some big missteps in certain games that just, we'll fix them later as they go, and that's where I'm not a fan of. This is the track I've been waiting for. We'll probably only do 1 or 2 rounds due to time, but Waluigi Stadium looks better than ever. I'm here for content roadmap updates when it comes to games like this, where you already feel like you have a ton of value to offer. You already feel like it's a fun, full game. You've already put, 60, 80 hours in. You've gotten a full experience. And then they say, hey, guess what? We're going to continue to add more. And shout outs to Nintendo on the visual quality, because you guys will definitely have to hop in and play this yourself. But it looks great. I mean, compared to, obviously the GameCube back in the early 2000s, just realizing the kind of texture differences that are on the road, seeing kind of all of the, the mud, the reflections. I mean, across the board, this is such a fun track. Definitely love that they kept the boosters on the side of the course and everything. Like, this was one of those classic go-tos that you must boot up on Double Dash back in the day. And for me, the one that I'm still waiting on is none other than DK Mountain from Double Dash, because that was one of those courses, for whatever reason, that I spent the most amount of time in, just memorizing every, right time to drift at every single moment. And I probably played that course far more than any other course in any Mario Kart game ever. So I'm personally hoping that that's in one of the future roadmaps. I do think you can dismiss, again, that 4chan leak that we discussed, because even Oatmeal Dome noted that none of the files that that person mentioned were actually spotted in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which either it's bogus and they got lucky with some of the guesses on the music, or it's one of those situations where they actually do have data mine files, but it's only tied to Tor and not tied to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe itself. So I do think we can dismiss those characters that were on a part of that leak. But, like I said, guys, we still have legitimately 5 more characters to go. So basically these next 2 waves are going to be a lot more than just tracks, which is very exciting. And it's just cool to see Mario Kart live on, and then ultimately Nintendo really continue to drive home the value when it comes to Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack. But I really want to hear from you guys at this point in the video, your personal thoughts and opinions around these newest content updates. How are you feeling about Metroid Fusion? Are you going to play through it? Do you have nostalgia for Wario Stadium like I do, or Waluigi Stadium, excuse me, like I do, or are you somebody that maybe never played this track? And then how do you feel about the characters? Which ones do you want to see return the most? Which ones are you most pumped for in terms of like being added back in? I know definitely Funky Kong, Diddy Kong for me. Hopefully the Paratrooper, the red Paratrooper from Double Dash, that was one of my staples. So share with me all your thoughts and feelings on everything in the state of NSO today, and whether or not you're checking out any of this new stuff as you boot up your Nintendo Switch here on March 9th. So regardless of your thoughts and feelings on everything we talked about today, I do look forward to hearing from you all in the comments down below before you leave the video, as I do look forward to getting a back and forth conversation started with you all around these topics. Go watch yesterday's video next if you haven't already, which is on screen right now. Also make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.